It is 5:20. It's 900 CHML. I'm Scott Thompson, Hamilton today. Jump into the conversation. 905-645-3221. Always looking for your last word to end the show. Send us a note, Scott Thompson at 900CHML.com. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new measures that will help protect Canadian renters and help them break into the housing market ahead of the budget. We understand instead of announcing all the budget details on April 16th, every day they're going to launch something else. Yesterday it was about renters. Today it's about childcare. The proposed measures in renting aim to amend Canadian mortgage charter to allow tenants to count on-time rent payments towards a credit score, and they proposed $15 million in new funding for a provincial legal aid organization to better protect tenants against bad landlords, and a code of conduct or rules, regulations, rules of engagement for that. Let's bring in Stewart Klazinga, ACORN, Hamilton, and here now. Stewart, thanks for the time. Hope you're well.
I am well. Yourself?
So far, so good, Stewart. Your thoughts on these measures aimed at renters yesterday? Will they help?
Well, whether or not they help, we haven't seen the bill yet, so we don't know exactly what's involved or how it's going to work. So, of course, the devil's going to be in the details there. But just going off of what the Prime Minister mentioned yesterday, like credit scores, yeah, okay, that's fine. Landlords currently can report to the Bureau of late payment or non-payment. So there's already the chance for it to be negatively impacted. So the chance for it to be positively impacted, I guess, is good. But the problem isn't really that rent payments don't show up on credit scores. The problem is that housing is unaffordable. And the problem is that renters get zero share in the equity that their rent produces. And I don't think continuing to rely on the market to solve these problems is the answer, because the market doesn't really care about renters. The market only cares about those who hold the capital, not those who produce it.
In regard to credit scores, if you weren't making rent, then that would affect your credit score. So would this not do the same thing, just in a positive measure? Obviously, if you don't hear from the credit people and the landlords regarding your rent, you've done a good job of covering yourself. Does this really have an impact?
Well, that depends to what extent a good credit score is helping people who are struggling to afford rent, or even unable to find a place that they can afford. Building a credit score in theory is a good thing, sure, but having a better credit score certainly won't help renters be able to afford a home in the increasing market, and it won't help renters pay more affordable rents if they move. So those problems will still exist whether you have a good credit score or not.
Bill of rights for renters. Obviously, we've heard stories, rent evictions, what have you, and tenants getting the short end of the stick. A bill of rights that I understand supports both. Is that needed, or is that already there? It's just enforcement we're looking at, or where we're lacking.
Well, I mean, specifically rights that apply to renters doesn't exist in the current landscape, but the right to housing, as recognized by the National Housing Strategy Act of 2019, is something that exists, and it is already unmet for so many Canadians. So I kind of fail to see how a renter's bill of rights will help them. How will a renter's bill of rights help the next renter who ends up homeless because of skyrocketing costs of living crisis, or people looking for a place to afford now? And another thing that was mentioned was the right to know what a unit was previously rented for.
Right.
This sounds good, and this is something that ACORN thinks is a good tool, but it's more a tool to help shed more light on the issues behind the housing crisis than a tool that can be used to solve the housing crisis, because it certainly doesn't help the individual who's looking for a place to rent, because the landlord still holds all the cards. They still have all the power. Knowing what the previous tenant paid doesn't give the prospective tenant any additional ability to negotiate when the supply is so far outweighed by the demand.
What should we be focused on with obviously a lens to renters?
building more housing and more social housing, and getting getting the commodification of housing for profit sort of out of the picture. If we remove those things from the housing market, there'll be a huge difference. And so look towards more social housing, more not-for-profit housing options, and so really we just need to build, but we need to build the appropriate units for what people need and for what people can afford and for what.
Stewart, how do we provide incentive for developers to do that? Because otherwise you're talking about subsidized housing, which I'm not sure everyone agrees with. So how do we, because I remember back in the day where there were apartment buildings everywhere, and then rent control came in and they stopped building apartments and then they went to condos. So what do we need to do? And we're starting to see an uptick in the building of these because the GST has been removed. But what do we need to do to create more apartments? Is there incentive to give builders to do that as opposed to creating, subsidized or freer housing? Because it seems governments don't have any money for anything, including healthcare or whatever. So now we're looking at housing. So how do we get the developers? How do we make this a private-public arrangement?
Yeah, so there's a difference between paying the builder to build the house and then, paying someone to hold that structure while it's occupied. Certainly, we need to pay builders to build housing because no one's going to build things for free, and so that. But I don't think that that's where the issue of where the profit's going lies. The issue of where the profit is going lies with those who end up purchasing those buildings and just amassing all of the equity while returning none of it to those who are paying for it.
So some sort of arrangement where the renter gets a piece of the action. Is that what you're looking at? Is that what you're suggesting?
I mean, I think that would be great. Certainly, the renters are the ones who are building that equity. And when you move out, maybe you should get a portion of the profits, or just abolish the for-profit model entirely and look at non-profit options for holding housing so that it's affordable, and even seeing things like apartments turned into condos where people who are already paying for that mortgage can just then own the mortgage themselves without the need for a middleman.
Stewart Klazinga with us, ACORN Hamilton. Speaking of the measures Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the other day in regard to helping renters. Not sure they will. Stewart, thanks for the time and insight. Much appreciated. Be well.
Thank you very much for having me on, and have a great long weekend.
You too. 5:28 news on the way.